In a recent video, I made some comparisons between Escape from Tarkov and a few games out there, whether they be released or still in development, and I forgot about some pretty good ones. Also, I had not played Hunt Showdown at the time, which many people out there saw as a great competitor. Also, I wanted to make clear this time that I use competitor as a simple descriptor here, as no game will necessarily win above the other, at least not for everybody playing it. It just quickly makes the point that they're similar and could possibly do some things better, while the things it does differently people might enjoy more. For example, and to start off with, I have now played Hunt Showdown and understand its gameplay enough to say if you want a very specific directed PvP shooter experience with an interesting boss fight in the middle of it, this game is pretty damn cool. In terms of my personal tastes and opinions, I think the audio is really well done. You can hear everything correctly and vividly in my mind. It also does the gear fear aspect quite well, where you don't necessarily need to worry about where your next loadout is coming from, but the sense of loss when you die before a bounty is strong. The sense of loss after a bounty is much stronger, but I've personally felt worse losing Chad kits and full raids worth of loot in the middle of a wipe in Escape from Tarkov before. Then if you end up making it to a maxed out hunter in the game, then 100% I can see that really sucking when you eventually do die, which I wasn't able to get a maxed out character in Hunt Showdown, so I can't make that comparison for myself yet, unfortunately. I think the skill ceiling is significantly higher to be able to do well as a solo player. A lot of people run around in groups and the combat is just different in that way. Although it is kind of useful to have the option to not see trios. As a solo player, you will have the option to be able to choose to only see duos at most, which I was able to get a couple wins there, so that was cool. I did want to say I don't really like when you've killed the boss and make your way to the extraction, you can be seen on the map by everyone else at all times. Not a good feature in my mind, but you know, there's going to be some differences, and I know that there's some gameplay that can come from that. Just that's my opinion on it. So all in all, I think if you want to have the best possible experience, you have to play with 3 people, at least a duo, and then make it so that you can't run into trios, so that you're on even ground with everybody that you would come up against to accomplish things at a consistent and high level, but that is just me. At the end of the day, it's about the adventure that you go on with the gameplay. What got you to the point that you're currently at, and can you make it out alive? And officially, in my book, Hunt Showdown absolutely has my seal of approval as a valid competitor to the kind of gameplay and feeling that we get while playing Escape from Tarkov. Road to Vostok is another name that keeps coming up. As far as I know, this will be a survival game without extractions, making it lean more towards a DayZ than a Tarkov, but the overall vibe you get from the gameplay that we have seen so far gives me a very good feeling about it. Realistically, a much better comparison here would be a Stalker game. This is single player, but those of you guys that have been following Escape from Tarkov might know about Russia 2028, which is supposed to be their single player game they're going to make after Escape from Tarkov. TLDR here is like that's the actual passion project that BSG set out to do, and Escape from Tarkov was what was going to give them the money to make that game, and then Escape from Tarkov ended up blowing up, so now they're tied into Escape from Tarkov more than ever, even though the story is very different and the environment is a little bit different, and I don't really see any NPCs or defined storyline to Road to Vostok. This looks very similar to what BSG had planned for Russia 2028. And although there isn't extractions, there are going to be shelters where, depending on where you are in the location, you can safely store gear, as well as save your game, because this is going to be a single player game, so you're going to be able to save your progress to a certain point. Road to Vostok is actually a very in-depth game. It is absolutely going to deserve its own video in the future, so stay tuned for more. As I've been saying for all these game comparisons, I really don't see anyone cloning or trying to remake Escape from Tarkov ever. The best we'll get is bits and pieces, or even possible large chunks of the gameplay experience without it ever being a complete substitute. Something I see Road to Vostok doing very well is the feeling that you get while trying to survive in the environment and still holding a non-fictional and realistic foundation, where almost all of the other games that I've discussed have quite a bit of fiction involved with it, and they don't really go for realism. The sole developer on the project, who goes by Anti on Discord, is releasing a demo this week, and I got to ask him what he was looking for with it specifically. In the response, he mentions this being the beginning of the feedback loop, where he will try to be as vulnerable to harsh feedback as soon as possible in order to work things out as soon as possible. He also is using this as a reality check of realistic deadlines that he can set for himself, as again the sole developer for the project, which he says he was able to accomplish well. This going to anybody that gets worried about scope creep or people getting ahead of themselves in developing these early access games. He ended it off by saying that this demo is just the start for me. Whether people find it positive or negative, I will continue the development until the game is the best hardcore survival game game out there, and I'm not disappearing anywhere, even if there is harsh critics and so on. That obviously being a very far-reaching goal. The Road to Vostok free demo should be available this week or so on Steam, and I'll be checking it out myself. I'll also be keeping an eye on the development to let you guys know of any other big moves into the future. Then last but most certainly not least, we have the closest comparison I have seen, which I somehow forgot to mention in the first video, Deadrop. This closed early access game is being developed by a new studio, Midnight Society, being led by some of the people responsible for some of the most played games I had as a kid and even still today, with Call of Duty and Gears of War and a few others. The devs put on a live stream yesterday, which I'll link below if you're interested. Afterwards, they did a meetup in Discord, and I got to talk to several of the devs and ask questions. Midnight Society, which I'll call 12 AM or M Society for short, is taking a day zero early access feedback approach to development and are, quote, focused on delivering the most community-focused online PvP multiplayer experience the world has ever seen. Now, before I go much further, I am actually going to say, as of right now, as it is still early access and things do change, but again, as of right now, Deadrop is the closest thing I have seen to a Tarkov playstyle. That's between how it plays right now, because yes, it is playable, or if you can't play it yourself, you can see how it plays, and even though it's just a gray box phase and still very early and has a long way to go, compared to how the devs say it will play in the future, or how they are planning on having it play in the future. Specifically, this is a game where you have a persistent private stash where you can select your loadout to bring with you into a raid, aka a drop, or match, or whatever they end up officially calling it, where you can then accumulate more gear by scavenging or collecting it from corpses of fellow players. There is a timer at the end of the drop where if you are the last player standing, then you get what's called a dead drop, and you collect all of the loot that is still left on the location. All of it. But you must be the only player left on the location. The devs say this is to promote the BR style of gameplay without actually forcing it with a smoke or a zone. However, if there's still multiple people alive at the end, the timer runs out and you will still die, so you will need to extract. Everything I just mentioned is playable and in-game right now if you have access to it, which is locked off. But currently there is no NDA on the gameplay, so you will find people making videos and streaming it right now. Just remember, this is a day zero feedback approach, and although we're much further past that in the current stage with this current gray box setup, this is literally the first iteration on the multiplayer online experience. There's a long way to go. Now, what's missing is a few key things to really finish making a comparison to Escape from Tarkov, and that is the AI, the gear, and the environment. Quick answer here for the environment, which a better word might be ecosystem when it comes to everything put together around the game. I don't think Deadrop is going to even try and make this game with the RPG elements and ideas that BSG planned to do with Tarkov, between the story, the NPCs, the reputations, and both in-raid and out-of-raid progression. Starting off with, the devs even went as far as, when discussing how gear will work in the game, they said that they are, quote, specifically looking at some of the things Tarkov and games like it do and want to streamline them. The future of gear and AI were something devs didn't want to discuss in detail just yet, but later they also said, quote, some of the things in Tarkov could be seen as tedious and we don't want that. So yeah, pretty clear right there. They're probably looking at some of the weapon customization and things like the medical system and mag reloads for sure there, without, again, giving specifics. They're going to clean that all up. Where for Tarkov, that stuff's not going anywhere. They want that in the game for a realistic factor to it. So with Deadrop, it sounds like the route they're taking is very much a fast-paced, more get in the fight as soon as possible take on the genre, if you want to call this its own genre, especially additionally when it comes to movement. We discussed movement, and again, although it's not finished being designed, there will be fast movement that will probably be affected in some way by a player decision with the gear they decide to use, yet still very fast. When discussing slide canceling and jumping around corners, as that's the hot topic right now for the current Call of Duty, the devs were very much open to it, but were very specific that if the gameplay started to turn to a need to use those types of movement constantly, they would make a change. They don't want to make people feel that they need to slide cancel everywhere and jump around every single corner, although they still find the types of movement acceptable in the game. So for sure, movement will not be something that you can make a full comparison to Tarkov with. Now, I did want to add in here, interestingly enough, later on, we discussed inertia and weight limits, and the devs didn't seem completely shut off by weight limits, at least. Now, I will be clear, it seems very apparent that they're not going to the limits of Tarkov, but they do want the feeling of important decision-making while under the gun and deciding what to take with you out of a raid if you do decide to leave the raid early, and that could possibly be part of that. Also, to be clear again, that was never confirmed by the devs, we were just discussing this stuff. And they did remind us constantly that things aren't final, and with every major decision, decision like that, it will be open to plenty of scrutiny from the testers and their feedback. What they're doing right now allows them to pivot and make big decisions in terms of gameplay quickly, get it out there for us to see, get feedback on it, and either remove it and move on or iterate on it. They also said there's other places that they can get that kind of feeling if they needed to. Then with inertia, on the other hand, although not directly spoken about, doesn't sound like an issue we will have with this game. The gameplay is very snappy and has a competitive feel. I don't think it will be a strong tipping point or issue in the future, we'll put it that way. So between all of that and the setting of a sort of cyberpunk-esque fictional reality, the realistic core behind Escape from Tarkov is not what we're going to see with Deadrop, past possibly the time to kill and the way that weapons work and their effectiveness. But all of that is far from being finished, so we'll have to see what happens with it. When it comes to weapon customization as well as gear loadouts, I was told that it will be significant in the future, although I wasn't given details on it. That was something that they didn't want to talk too much about. Also, the tech director, Alex, was keeping information about AI and PvE aspects of the game close to the chest somewhat, but still was able to tell me that it was something they very much want to be part of the game and are experimenting with how exactly they want the AI to impact the player experience. It sounds like they are open to messing around with several types of ideas for the AI, and we will be open to give feedback on it, as that does seem to be the big picture here with this entire development. They want us to see it, test it, and give feedback on every iteration and piece of the pie as it moves forward. So given that, I'm very confident that we will see AI in some form in the game in the future. What we'll have to see is if they have as big of a part to play as the AI in Escape from Tarkov do. So in conclusion, out of all of the games that we've seen and heard about recently, I thought Call of Duty's DMZ was going to be the closest thing that we could get to an Escape from Tarkov, but here's Deadrop sneaking up on us and actually taking that spot for now. Because although Deadrop is playable, it's closed access and years from completion, while DMZ will be available for free in November. I do have to say some really interesting trade-offs on all of these different games. So right now, I would say Deadrop is the real game to keep an eye on, apart from Tarkov, of course, especially where it's so active and when they're going around saying stuff like they are, quote, focused on delivering the most community-focused online PvP multiplayer experience the world has ever seen. I, again, still strongly believe Tarkov will hold the top spot as the realistic, nitty-gritty gameplay, and one of these games, whether it be DMZ or Deadrop or something else, will hold the opposite side of the spectrum there, with the same feel, but much faster pace and streamlined gameplay, and Escape from Tarkov Arena will probably be a good middle ground. But that's just me. What do you guys think? You can comment on this video, follow me on Twitter, or ask me on Discord. All of that you'll find below. If you like this video, then you know the drill. Please subscribe. I really appreciate the people who do. Otherwise, I hope you have a nice day. See you guys.